صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. ما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Tonight, inshallah, I'm going to, inshallah, talk about some reflections of the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam mentioned in the Quran. There's obviously many different parts of his story mentioned in the Quran. But inshallah, I'm going to just choose three parts in the Quran, three of his stories. And obviously, it's the season of Hajj, so it's a good time to remember Ibrahim alayhi salam's legacy and the things that we can learn from his legacy. Now, of course, this also coincides with the time of graduations and, people are opening new parts of their life, new chapters in their life. So it's also a good time to tie the two together. Because as our youth graduate from high school and go to college, they are going to embark on a new journey in their life that will define much of who they will be as adults. And so it's a good time for us to reflect how this time can affect their life as adults, and what are the things that we can learn from Ibrahim alayhi salam that can help our youth in their journey that's coming ahead. And so in that respect, inshallah, I want to concentrate on two main themes mentioned in these specific stories. Obviously, there are many themes, but the two themes that I want to talk about today, inshallah, are the theme of sacrifice and the idea and the theme of hard work. And as we talk about these three specific incidents, we will try to tie them back to sacrifice and hard work. The first obvious thing that we always talk about when it comes to Ibrahim alayhi salam is when he left his wife Hajar and Ismail alayhi salam in the desert. This is a very well-known story that we always mention when we talk about Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now the interesting thing is, when Ibrahim alayhi salam was first ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to leave his wife and his son in the desert, his wife, as Ibrahim alayhi salam turns away from them, she asks him. She says, "Are you going to leave us like this without any food or water?" So he stays silent. She asks him again, and he stays silent. So she knew at that point that this must be an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So she asks him, she says, "Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala order you to do this?" So he said yes. So she responded saying, "If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to do this, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not neglect us." This is our very first lesson, and that is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects us to sacrifice certain things in our life. Because as Muslims, our role in this world is, we should not expect from this world to get everything that we expect and not have to sacrifice anything to reach Jannah. Because if that was the case, if it was the case that we are expected to not sacrifice anything in this world to reach Jannah, then what would be the purpose of Jannah in the first place? So we look forward to Jannah because ultimately we will have to sacrifice things in this world. And when we have a strong belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we believe and we understand that if we sacrifice something for His sake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always have a way of protecting us because of that choice that we made. Even if that choice of sacrifice, it seems to us like a daunting task. Like, how can we survive in this desert without any food or water? But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who ordered Ibrahim alayhi salam to do that, then ultimately we submit to His order and we understand that this sacrifice is going to pay us dividends in return. In addition to this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentions in the Quran the dua that Ibrahim alayhi salam said, which was, "رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِن ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ فَاجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ وَارْزُقْهُم مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ." Oh Allah, I have left my offspring in the desert in order for them to worship you. So, oh Allah, make people come to them, give them provisions, and protect them so that they may be able to realize your blessings. This dua that Ibrahim alayhi salam made, he waited until he was behind the mountain out of sight before he made this dua. You see, if his wife is going to be left alone in the desert, and she sees Ibrahim alayhi salam making that dua in front of her, it will give her comfort, right? Because she sees Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Prophet, making this dua in front of her. So it will give her comfort. But Ibrahim alayhi salam wants her to know that you have to rely fully on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he waited until he was out of sight before making that dua to teach her that don't worry about me, and if I make that dua, even if you are alone in the desert, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for you. Even if I don't make this dua, I do make this dua, you are alone in the desert, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you. So this is a way to teach her, again, how to fully rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now when Hajar alayhi salam, she's in the desert, and Ismail alayhi salam is with her, and he becomes thirsty and hungry, and now she wants to go and look for something to feed him. So we know obviously that she went to the Mount of Safa, she looked around, she didn't find anything, and then she went to the Mount of Marwa, and so on. Now if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, He could have made Zamzam, the water that came from gushing from the ground, happen after she just reaches the first Mount of Safa. It's possible. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, He could have made it happen instantly. But instead, she had to go from the Mount of Safa to the Mount of Marwa 7 times before the water came gushing from the ground, right? And if you go to Mecca, you realize it's not an easy task to go from the mount 7 times, and now especially it's flat. There's no gravel. Imagine in the heat of the desert without any air conditioning, having to make this 7 times while your child is crying in the desert. Again, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, He could have made it very easy. But again, she had to go through this hardship and travel from this mount to that one mount 7 times. And then finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to make the water of Zamzam come, and she was able to feed Ismail alayhi salam. So when we look at this story, we realize even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you, even if you are a prophet, even if you are the wife of a prophet, even if you are a righteous person, and you rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't mean that you have a free ticket, that you're not going to have to work hard. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, another very prime example. He was the best of the prophets, but it did not give him a free ticket that he was going to go through this world without any hard work. And so sometimes, as Muslims, we think and we tell ourselves, okay, I'm going to start praying. And you expect that now that you are a good Muslim and you're starting to pray, that somehow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make your life easy for you. Right? That's not how it works. Sometimes you say, okay, I'm going to be keen on how I get my rizq, my income. I'm going to make sure that my income is going to be halal. And you expect that because you made that decision, that you're not going to have to put hard work. You think that it's going to now be easy because you are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it hard for you if you are worshiping Him and you are coming close to Him? But the rules of this world, they still apply. You still have to put in the hard work. But the difference is that when you are putting that hard work, if you have a goal in mind that is good, that hard work looks like and it becomes easy for you. That's the difference. from someone who is observing you, it may seem like it's an arduous task, like a very tough task. But when you are going through this task, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it very, very easy for you. But you still have to put in the hard work. You know, subhanAllah, a great example of this is when you look at the Battle of Uhud. The Battle of Uhud was one of the worst defeats that the Muslims suffered. And when the Muslims were in the middle of the battle, after all of the suffering and death and hardship that happened to them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that moment made the true believers fall asleep. He made them fall asleep to the point that they would fall over. And the people that didn't fall asleep were the hypocrites. And they were surprised. They would look around them and they would see some of the believers, some of them are falling asleep. How come this tranquility isn't coming to the hypocrites? They ask themselves, how come it's not happening to me? It's because their goals are different than the goals of the believers. So the believers, they will go through tests, trials, tribulations. They're expected to work very, very hard. But those tasks may become very easy for them if they have the right goals in mind. When we look at another story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, one of the also amazing stories is when Ibrahim alayhi salam was thrown in the fire. And we all know what led up to this. And when the people that he was making da'wah to decided to throw him in the fire, in order to make Ibrahim try to change his mind, they held him prisoner in like a house that's overlooking the preparation for the fire. So they are preparing for the fire by bringing all of this firewood. And they are expecting Ibrahim alayhi salam to go back on what he's telling them to do just by seeing the preparation for the fire. Well, of course, Ibrahim alayhi salam was steadfast. And when Ibrahim alayhi salam was being thrown in the fire, and they had to throw him using like some kind of catapult because it was so large. In that moment, Jibreel alayhi salam comes to him and asks him. And he says, is there something I can do for you? So Jibreel alayhi salam is coming to Ibrahim alayhi salam and he's asking him, is there something that I can do for you? You're about to enter the fire. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, being very smart, he says, from you, no. Because if Ibrahim alayhi salam asked Jibreel alayhi salam to do something for him, what does that mean? That means that his entire message of Tawheed is now null. Because the entire message of Tawheed is, if you ask something, you ask from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who allows things to happen or doesn't allow things to happen. If you were to ask Jibreel alayhi salam, it would mean that somehow Jibreel has the power to change what's about to happen. But he doesn't. So Jibreel alayhi salam asks him, is there something I can do for you? And he says, no. From you, no. And he makes a very beautiful dua. And he says, oh Allah, you are the only one in the sky. And I am the only one that worships you on this earth. And he says, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Oh Allah, truly, you are the only person I rely on, and you are the only one that I will seek help from. And when he was thrown in the fire, we know, of course, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered Jibreel to make the fire peaceful for him and not to harm him in any way. So, from this story, we see that Ibrahim alayhi salam, even though he was calling to Tawheed, he had to sacrifice so much and he was tested in the ultimate way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He tests the prophets, He tests the prophets in a way so that He can set a standard for us to look at these tests and to realize what the standard is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He tests the righteous people. And again, Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was thrown in the fire and all of this transpired, it didn't discourage him from continuing his mission to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It didn't change his mind about calling people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so in our life, we may go through obstacles, we may go through very tough times, we may go through extreme hardships and trials, but at the end of the day, we have to keep our eye on the prize. At the end of the day, you pick yourself up and you keep moving forward. It should never distract you, discourage you from your ultimate goal of meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He is very happy with you. And this is the last, inshallah, the last story that I will talk about, and then I want to have more of a discussion about practical things of how we can apply these three stories in our lives today, inshallah. So the last story is when Ibrahim alayhi salam goes and tells his son Ismail that he received a dream that he is slaughtering him. And he asks Ismail alayhi salam, he says, what do you think? And Ismail alayhi salam responds with, قَالَ يَا أَبَتِ افْعَلْ مَا تُؤْمَرْ. Oh, my father, do what you please. Now the interesting thing about this is Ibrahim alayhi salam spent his life raising Ismail alayhi salam. Now, if Ismail alayhi salam, he wasn't raised properly, do you think that's his response? That would be his response? If Ibrahim alayhi salam didn't put in the work and the effort to raise Ismail alayhi salam properly, this would not be his response. But his response of, oh, father, do what you please, means that Ibrahim alayhi salam raised Ismail well. Right? That's what it means. Because if he didn't raise him well, he would never allow his father to slaughter him. He would never allow his father to harm him. He would tell him all kinds of things. Right? So if we expect a good outcome, a good result, we have to put in the effort. We cannot assume that by default our children will obey us just because we are righteous people, or because we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we pray. By default, then my children should listen to me. It doesn't happen that way. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he had to put in the effort from very young age in order for Ismail alayhi salam to be prepared, so that when the time comes, he has that response. He says, oh father, do what you wish. If this is an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do what you wish. Just like his mother, when she found out that this was the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, okay, no problem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for us. And we know that Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was building the Kaaba, he was building the Kaaba with Ismail. And there are so many different things we can learn from this, but we see that Ibrahim alayhi salam, he put in the effort, and that's why Ismail alayhi salam turned out to be a righteous son, to obey his father and to say what he did at that moment when Ibrahim alayhi salam needed Ismail alayhi salam most to say this. And so, obviously, if you want a good outcome, you have to put in the effort. You have to put in the effort. Now, these were just three very quick examples from the Quran of the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And now I want to take these three examples and try to talk about practical things for us. First of all, I think we can all agree that the generation that is growing up now, the ones that were born in the last, let's say, 10 to 15 years, they don't really understand what sacrifice is about. What we went through is much different than what they went through, and the generation that is coming up and growing up right now, they really don't understand sacrifice. When you look at what they have in terms of phones and technology and all of this stuff, they have everything they could have ever asked for. They don't really understand what it means to not have everything they asked for. we as parents have often provided an environment for them where we give them everything they want. You know, whether it's the latest clothing, the latest gadgets, the newest car, whatever the case is, everything they want, we give them. And we do this because sometimes we don't want them to go through what we went through, where we were not able to get everything that we wanted because of the circumstances we were in. So we think that this is going to be healthy for them, and they will grow up learning how to be, good kids, and learning gratitude and learning how to obey their parents. We assume that if we provide them everything that they can want at a young age, that somehow they are going to learn the skills they need to be good people. And obviously, this is not what's happening. This is not what's happening. Unfortunately, when we have this type of environment, our kids don't really understand what sacrifice is about. They don't understand the difference between needs and wants, and they don't develop gratitude, they don't respect their parents, and they think that it is their right for their parents to give them everything they ever wanted, whatever they ask for. And when we look at what's happening with our youth today, we realize that because of this type of behavior, they develop a very strong sense of selfishness. Because the only thing they think about is fulfilling their own desires of, I want this, I want that, I want this. And therefore, it's all about what I want and not about, what's happening around me. And so, when we look at the Quran, when we look at how Islam teaches us to survive in this world, we have to put priorities on things. Because, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't expect us to get more reward just because we suffer in this world. Like if you think that living a harsh life is going to make you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and suffering in this world is a more righteous approach, that's not really what Islam is about. Islam says, yes, you can enjoy this world, you can live a good life as long as you don't sacrifice your hereafter. And so it's okay and it's recommended to spend from what you have on your children. It is perfectly fine to give them a comfortable living conditions. Perfectly fine to clothe them well. It's actually recommended, right? But we also have to realize that it's important to teach them certain concepts that they will need as they grow up. And one of these concepts is the concept of sacrifice. And so there may be certain times where we as parents, we can tell them, no, this is not the right time to get this gadget or whatever the case that you want, and to teach them that ultimately there are better things that we can do with the money that we have. The money that we have and what we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are better things that we can do than just to fill our desires from this world. If we start to think about things this way, we then start to realign our concept of what is something that we need versus something that is not necessary, and we can better utilize what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to elevate us when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the first thing, is that we don't really, or we have to understand how to teach our children the concept of sacrifice. The second concept of hard work is also a very, very important concept, as we have seen. And oftentimes, when we, deal with our youth, and it comes time for example, they get older and it's time for them to drive and start to be independent. So that is a perfect time to teach them what hard work is all about. when they start to become independent, they start to realize what they need in this world. They're no longer fully dependent on their parents. It is a good time to start to teach them the concept of hard work. And we cannot teach them this concept of hard work, again, if we give them everything they want and we don't make them work for what they want. So, for example, as a simple example, if one of our kids wants a new car, because now he's able to drive, and as a parent, you tell them, okay, I'm going to buy you your first car, right? So, and your thinking is not a bad way to think about it, because you're like, you know what, I'm going to buy him a nice car that's not going to break down, because I don't want him to deal with, trouble on the road, or I don't want him to wake up one morning having to go to work and, the car doesn't start. So I'm going to get him a nice, reliable car so he's able to get, to and back from work and so on. This is usually how we think. But, again, if they didn't buy that car with their own money, they're not going to understand the value of that car. They're not going to understand the value of hard work. And it is a much different feeling when they actually work, save up their money, find a car that is mediocre. Maybe it's not the best car, but it's their car. They actually earned it themselves. If they work hard and earn their money and buy the car with the money that they earned, they will be very careful not to destroy that car. Right? They're going to be very, very careful that they take good care of that car, because it came from their own money. If someone just gives them the car, they don't understand really what hard work is about. They may not take good care of the car. Because, if someone gave me a car once, he can most likely give me another car again. Or if it breaks down, someone's going to take care of it. And when you think about, our fathers or even us growing up, some of us, most of us, we had to deal with, cars that weren't in perfect condition. We had to deal with cars that would, break down every once in a while and fix them. We had to deal with that. But we learned. We learned how to, it's okay. Sometimes you have to take the bus. Sometimes you have to take a taxi. It's okay. Right? Your car breaks down, you call your neighbor, and your neighbor gives you a ride. That's perfectly fine. The world that we live in today, unfortunately, in a house, you have 4 or 5 cars. Each person has their own car. And they don't want to share a car with anyone. So this is, if you think about our youth growing up, this is not going to teach them what hard work is all about. And they think that, if I have to share a car with someone, then somehow I'm being neglected. That, I'm going to grow up not having everything that I want, and it's going to scar me for life. But in reality, if you think about how the rest of the people in this world live, we are way, way beyond the means of what the rest of the people in this world live. Sometimes I know, like, for example, my uncles and my aunts, they will buy a car that will be the car they will keep their entire life. They go through engines and transmissions and they replace, but they can't afford to keep buying new cars every 3 or 4 years. They have one car for the family, and that car stays with them literally for 30 to 40 years. And this is how it used to be, back in America. This is how it used to be. It wasn't the case that a family would have 4 or 5 cars, and every 3 or 4 years they buy new cars. And so, when we look at the lessons and the values that we give our children, these are some of the things that we have to impart on them, so that when they become adults and they understand what hard work is actually about, they then put things in perspective. Because you see, if you understand what hard work is actually about after you're married and after you have children, that's really, really late in the game. And when that happens, you've already made really, really bad decisions up to that point. And then when you have kids, and then you start to realize what hard work and financial responsibility and all of this is all about, you've already wasted a lot of your life, made a lot of bad decisions. When you learn these lessons as a young adult before you embark on the new chapter in your life, then there's a good chance that as an adult, you will make the right decisions when it comes to what you are going to impart to your kids. You're then going to understand the value of hard work, the value of money, what that actually means, and you will understand how what the money that you have, the resources that you have, maybe there's a better way to invest these resources for the akhirah. And subhanAllah, I'm going to conclude with this. When you look at our institutes, this masjid, our Islamic schools, right? These institutes, most of them were established in the 80s, right? So we're talking about 30 years. 30 years ago, as a community, we were far fewer in number. Much, much less resources, right? Maybe a 10th or a 20th of what we are today. But to establish these institutes 30 years ago was a much, much harder task than it is now, right? But 30 years ago, that generation, they really understood what sacrifice was about. And so when it came time to put money to establish institutes, they did it. They were able to raise millions of dollars in a short period of time to build these institutes 30 years ago, not now, when they were much fewer in number. They were not as affluent as we are today, right? But they did it. And now today, when you look at our institutes are really struggling to barely make ends meet, even though we are much, much larger in number. We have a lot more resources. We are a lot more affluent. But people don't understand the concept of sacrifice. How is it that, 5 or 6 families 30 years ago were able to raise, $3 or $4 million to build a place 30 years ago, and they did it. And now we struggle to raise that money among hundreds of families that are much more affluent because they didn't develop those skills that we need, those skills today, to build and to establish our institutes as they were established 30 years ago. And I know a very close friend, subhanAllah, and again, he was one of those parents, one of those, that came to America in the 80s. And he was a businessman in New York City. And he had established, mashallah, very well established businesses and so on. And his kids were born in New York City. When his kids got to the age of going to school, they didn't have good Islamic schools in New York City at that time. And the closest good Islamic school was in New Jersey. So this brother, he sold everything. He sold everything that he owned. He picked up himself and his family, and they moved to New Jersey where they had a good Islamic school because he wanted to raise his kids in a good Islamic environment. And he started from scratch. How many of us are willing to do that today? Right? Sacrifice. Hard work and sacrifice. But the effort that he put in the effort that he put in 30 years ago paid off dividends when his kids became adults. And he looks back and he sees who they are as adults and he says, Alhamdulillah, they came up this way because they grew up in a good Muslim environment. If he hadn't made that sacrifice, they wouldn't be where they are today. And mashallah, his kids now are very successful, very good Muslims, very strong, and highly educated, and have, really, really good understanding of how to be Muslim in America. Why? Because he decided 30 years ago that it was important that he makes that sacrifice. And he literally picked up imagine selling all your businesses in your home and everything, and picking up and moving to an area. Why? Because there was a good established Muslim community there. And so, when we, concluding all of this, to wrap this all together, if we as a community, we keep looking at our own benefit and not the benefit of the community at large, in terms of, when I say own benefit, it means worldly benefit, we will never be able to move forward and establish what we need with our kids if we don't teach them the basic lessons that we need to impart to them in order for them to carry the torch moving forward. We have to understand that this community the society that we live in, it's all about consumerism. It's all about how much you consume. Your value as an individual is all about how much you consume as an individual, how much you move the economic wheel. The more you consume, the better you are to the economic wheel. And so we are constantly driven to not think about consequences, to not think about how much debt you're going to get into, to not think about, 30 years from now where you're going to be. You are just trained, if you want something, buy it, get into debt, it's okay, use your credit card, go get a loan. This is how we are trained. Why? Because it is not good for someone to understand the concept of sacrifice and hard work if you expect him to constantly be a consumer in this society that we live in. So we as Muslims, this is not how we think. We understand consequences. We understand sacrifice. We understand that the money that we have, the resources that we have, there are better things that we can put them in instead of just indulging in this world and getting into more debt and buying this and buying that and so on and so forth. And with that, I think that's all I have for today. And I would like to open the floor for any comments or questions, concerns. I hope I didn't offend anyone. I was just being, very frank, and I hope that, I didn't offend anyone. I apologize if it came across as offensive. Yes, yes. Yeah, this is the quote. I'm going to just repeat. The quote is, "Live your life as if you will live, forever, but prepare for your akhirah as if you will die tomorrow." Right? And this is absolutely, and subhanAllah, back to this point, the Prophet Muhammad he instructs us that if you see the qiyamah coming, right, and you have a seed, plant it. Right? That's very profound. Which means that utilize every moment that you have in this world, of course, to get ajr, but plan for the future. Right? Plan for the future. We are planners. We are people that are not, we as a community, we are not like the people that are monks. We're not monks. Right? We benefit from this world, but at the same time, we don't let that sacrifice our akhirah. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Any from the sisters? Okay. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا